Welcome to Creative Love Radio. This is Dr. Rob. Today we're going to be talking about steps to higher love.
It's going to be a great show. I'm ready.
Welcome to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. We are redefining relationships to guide you to greater love, more success, and living your purpose through the latest research in neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Eastern wisdom. Get ready for another inspirational episode of Creative Love Radio.
Okay, episode number 10, The Steps to Higher Love. Great show, great topic.
Right, and we thought a good way to talk about higher love and steps to higher love would be to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Very interesting.
Yeah, Maslow, he was considered a humanistic psychologist. And what that means was that early on in psychology, there was Freud and his band, of course, and they were considered the depth psychologists of the psychoanalytic group. And then opposing them, especially in the U.S., was the behaviorist, right, which were completely the opposite. They were looking at behavior and measuring behavior and how to increase it or decrease it and that kind of stuff.
So more about how people respond and act and react to things. And instead of internally, it's more of an external mechanical type of way of looking at how we approach things. And we see this with love, too. There's people that are internal. They work with the mindset. Yes. And then there's people that work with, well, if you don't call after 3 days, you'll get a different response. So that would be a behaviorist, right?
Right, and so the humanists, they considered themselves a third force, meaning they were not psychodynamic like Freud and his group, but they were not behaviorist either. They considered themselves a third force in psychology, which looked at human behavior from a more humanistic perspective. And that simply means that they were looking more at, how do we behave as social beings? What are the emotions involved in motivation and love and relatedness? So Maslow, who went to the University of Wisconsin, actually, my alma mater.
Is that why you went to University of Wisconsin? His work was very influential at the time, and it still is. If you look on YouTube or type in hierarchy of needs, his work is all over the place on the internet. And there's still a lot of psychologists who go by this humanistic theory, basically. So if we break it down and kind of simplify it, there's really 3 levels to his pyramid of self-actualization. The first one is the biological needs, right? We need food, shelter, safety, those kind of things. Make sure we're okay. Mm-hmm. The second level is more social. We need relatedness, love, acceptance, self-esteem, those kind of things that, work and meaning of creating families give us. Being part of a group, being social, all that good stuff. Have a relationship.
That's where, a lot of the relationship stuff comes in. But it also comes in at the higher level, self-actualization.
So it's beyond just the physical needs, biological, I need to have shelter and food and warmth, and then also belong in society. But there's a higher level, which is a spiritual aspect.
Right. There's self-actualization, this kind of taking all your talents, all your desires and your emotions to the highest peak of human existence. It does include that spiritual element, of course, but it's not necessarily in a religious, formal way. He meant self-actualization in a very Jungian sense of individuation. Right? Becoming who you really meant to be, who you really are meant to be in a complete sense.
And when we think about higher love,
don't we want to be with someone who matches our highest ideal?
Right.
Versus someone who's just the part of ourselves that's just trying to survive in life, or even having a relationship to just belong. Do we want to attract someone who wants to meet us at that level? Like, you take care of me and I'll take care of you so we won't be alone in the world. There's a much higher love available to us.
Right. So let's go back to the bottom,
Okay.
right? We all need physiological needs, we all have physiological needs, and that motivates us, to take care of ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. To eat well, to find good places to live, clean places to sleep, all that good stuff. Once those needs are met, then I can think about a relationship. Mm-hmm. I can think about self-esteem. I can think about poetry. I can think about aesthetic needs and those kind of things. I'm not going to be thinking about beautiful poetry and reading literature if I'm hungry or if I don't have a place to sleep.
I know a lot of people maybe look for a partner sometimes because for financial security, or for, I know maybe not now the modern woman has her own career, but maybe 100 years ago, that was a survival need, right? To get married, because women weren't allowed to own homes. They weren't allowed to, even until the 60s, allowed to have their own bank account. So, I mean, they were very dependent on, their survival was very dependent on finding a mate in that way.
Right. I think at the relationship level, at the biological, let's say physical survival level, we have needs as far as human touch, sexuality, of course, those kind of things. So it plays in that way, right? That we have basic need for human contact and relating with other bodies, in a sense. What you're talking about, I think, is a little bit more at the social level, because marriage was always seen for both men and women as a social contract that helped them climb the social ladder. So it wasn't just women that were looking to get married into a good family. Men also wanted to get married into a good family because it secured their position in society as well.
But there's also the physical need for someone to put a roof over your head, someone to work for you, someone to bring home the bacon, supposedly. So that's, I think you can make the argument that it could be for both in a way, the physical and the social.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we see in our work is a lot of people approach relationships still from that survival mind, right? They're coming from kind of a very basic need of, I don't want to be lonely, right? And it could be at that second level of the social piece that I want to get married because all my friends are married, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But they're very kind of basic, low-level approaches to relationship and love.
Well, I know when I was young, in my 20s, I wasn't raised to have a career. So it was really a need, a financial need for me to find a husband. And in my mind, I kept looking at my friends who were stay-at-home moms and thinking, well, when I get a husband, then I won't have to work anymore, and I'll have that financial security, because that's kind of how I was raised, is that, you don't really have a career of your own. So I think, too, I mean, it is that social piece, too, of being married, but I think from the perspective that I experienced, it was more that if I have a man or had a man, I would feel more secure.
Sure. And
I'd have the roof over my head, and I'd live in the cul-de-sac, and I'd have the picket fence and the 2.3 children and the dog, and there was something secure about that, and I would be able to survive. And when I was single, I felt like I was just flailing out there like this single woman, like trying to make it, trying to, kind of make my ends meet, and if I had a second income, or even someone who made more money, or someone who was more successful, and I know that's me personally. I I'm sure I don't speak for all women, but I'm sure there's some women that hear that and think, yeah, that too. Like, it's just like a lot of us were raised that way, that survival is, the man is the one who really brings home the money.
Sure. And then there are other people that, they're successful already. Mm-hmm. They don't need anybody to give them a shelter and provide basic stuff for them or money or anything like that. But they haven't really thought about love in this self-actualizing way. Mm-hmm. Right? In other words, they're still kind of thinking about relationships as companionship or, I don't want to be lonely. Mm-hmm. Right? So they haven't really brought up their mindset to that higher level of conceptualizing relationships in a spiritual sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, too, if you have a career and you're really successful, there could be also the threat of survival if you bring someone else into the mix now, because you created it all yourself without a man's help, and now you're going to bring someone in that's going to be like a wrecking ball and turn your life upside down. And I think for men and women, there's sometimes we whatever we saw in the past of how how marriage affected our parents or the people around us, and it takes us off that need for just having that stability financially and having that, kind of even personal safety and all those things that come into play, and then socially having, the need to fit in. And for really, if you think about looking for love, do you want someone that wants to marry you or be with you because he wants to fit in, or you want someone who says you're the love of my life? And so that's really the difference, is like when you start to see yourself coming from these lower places, and not that they're lower meaning bad or negative, they're just kind of a different expression, a limited expression of human behavior. It's that, do you want someone to approach love toward you that way? And we can sometimes feel that when we're turned off by people that come on too strong, or they're really needy, and we're like, or they're like eyeing the fancy loft that you have, or the fancy car, and they're not making a lot of money, or they're kind of lost in their career, and you're just like, okay, is this person just hooking up to me because I'm a success figure versus I'm, their true love? And so we have to look at love in a different way, in a higher way. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, we could live like most people and just hook up that way, or we can have an opportunity to have a higher love.
All right. So that saying that we're very fond of repeating, right, that Jung says the best time to work on your relationship is before you get into one, applies here. What ideally we want to do is reach those higher levels of self-actualization before we get into a relationship. That way we can approach it with that in mind, right? That I want somebody that's also self-actualized.
Or if you don't, and you attract someone on maybe the social level, and then you become self-actualized, it's like you're going to have to either choose whether that person's going to rise with you, or you're going to leave the relationship. So it's better off to start off with someone who's resonating on the higher levels than not. But it's not impossible. I mean, we've seen people come together and grow together. I mean, that's really, you don't have to reach the top to meet someone. I think a lot of people think, well, when I have my life perfect and I understand my unconscious and I'm more spiritual and more awakened, then I can meet my person. Like, there's no finish line, but you want to get to a point where you're not just operating from the social and you're really into this individuation, as Jung calls it. And then together you can grow together. So there's still more to go when you grow higher levels when you get in a relationship.
Yeah, and I would say the ideal relationship allows you to self-actualize.
Yes.
Right? Because there you have the support of someone who is interested in self-actualizing as well. And that becomes a very powerful place then.
this kind of nurturing relationship.
That's a great point. I've had people ask me, well, this person hasn't done their work yet. They haven't done any personal development, but they're really interested in what I'm saying, and they're really open. And I always say that if they're willing to grow, that's it doesn't have to take them years to reach a level of awakening. It's their willingness to open up. Now, if you're the type of person that wants to grow and wants to reach higher levels, and you meet someone who isn't, you're not going to convince them. They're going to have to, develop that desire within themselves. So the best place is to be with someone who has that desire too. It's not like a hierarchy where you're more enlightened than me. It's more like we're both willing to grow together. And actually, in a lot of ways, I think when you and I met, we had done our work on, but I think we've grown in different ways. Like I think we've learned different things that have helped us in the parts that we hadn't fine-tuned yet or awakened in yet.
Yeah, and we all seen couples where one of them wants to grow and is very invested in self-actualizing, and the other one says, I'm okay. You go ahead. Mm-hmm. And we know
you go to that workshop with your girlfriend. Yeah.
Right. Or, just studying and reading and meditating or just, kind of thinking about what is it that I'm doing here with my life and what is the meaning of it. Or starting a business or starting a new project. And the other one says, no, I want to keep our life the way it is right now. And they kind of drag their feet.
Or they see your growth as a threat to them. And they discourage it, or they say, that's a bunch of hoo-ha. Why do you need to do all that?
Right. So we know that's not going to last very long. Mm-hmm. Either the other partner is going to say, well, I'm sorry, but I have to go. I have to do this. Or the other partner is going to say, well, if I really love this person, I'm going to try to change as well, right? And self-actualize as well.
Well, and the worst thing you can do is retreat and give up your own growth to sacrifice your growth for the relationship, and feel. And I've done that many times in my dating life where I felt like I had to take a step back because I was that person isn't meeting me there, so I just have to kind of stay at their level. And that doesn't help you, and it doesn't help them. The best thing you can do for others is to make the most of yourself. And so even if you have to leave the relationship and you have to move on, it's going to help them in some way, because somewhere down the line, you're going to be an inspiration to them and say, they're going to see what's possible. And by you kind of staying and resonating. And this also, don't you think this also has to do not only with romantic relationships, but friendships? We've seen a lot of our clients, and I know for us, our friendships change when you go through the individuation. There's people that are still operating on that primal survival social level, and they're not really self-actualizing. And you start doing this work and you start growing and understanding yourself. And then you're like, I really don't like hanging out with this girl, Jane, anymore, or Beth, or, they're kind of, I have nothing in common with them anymore. And so didn't you say, I remember you telling me this, that Jung said there's a tremendous amount of guilt that happens when we go through this too, like leaving people behind?
When you individuate or self-actualize, absolutely, because you are changing and you have to leave people behind psychologically, right? Emotionally. Yeah. You don't have to reject them, but often they don't match up with you anymore. It's not the same energy. It's not the same you that they knew in college or in your previous work. And so the relationships fall away sometimes.
Now, I love what he says about these so-called lower levels of the hierarchy of needs. They're more coming from a place of deficiency. Like, so when you're coming from the biological level, it's more, I don't have enough, like a lack, right? I need more money, or, you're kind of in the red when it comes to finances, or you're feeling alone, or like kind of not secure in your own career, or you're, in and out of jobs, and you kind of don't really have a sense of that stability physiologically, and that lack. And we also feel that too with sexuality, like that whole idea that I need to be touched, and that lack mentality is really, there's a desire to be touched, but then there's a need to be touched. That's that deficiency. Kind of, you're coming from that mindset of, I don't have enough. And so if you want to think about what level you're at, one of the ways is to say, how am I looking at my life now? Am I happy with my life right now? And is this partner going to add to my life? Or is this partner going to fill up a lack that I need? So if you're coming from that deficiency for love, you are operating on those lower levels. And so if you're under deficiency and you're looking for Joe Guru, who's like this beautiful what's that called? A motivational speaker, and, this star, and you're just like, oh, if I could just hook up with someone like that, who's wise and, has all this self-realization, but you're coming from that deficiency, you won't match up with someone who appears to be, self-actualized. So it's the same thing. You have to approach it from love, from a growth mindset, where you're moving toward how can I use relationships to grow and to know myself versus to survive.
Right. And really, we're entering new territory here, because Maslow didn't really talk about relationships at these higher levels of self-actualized people coming together. So what would it look to you, or how would it look to you to see two self-actualized people in a relationship, besides us, of course?
Well, one of the things I think, that idea that you're coming from a place of you're becoming, always becoming, versus that you're, there's a finish line or there's something to attain, that you're both becoming. So there's no competition. There's no sense of insecurity of they're going to leave you for someone else, or that it's like kind of like a ownership of each other, and then a jealousy of each other, of who's doing better in their careers, or this one is jealous because your career's taking off. The relationship is like very supportive, and wanting the person to be an individual too, not always wanting to be agreeable, to be dependent on you. They're actually cheering you on. I remember when we met, I was on the TV interview, right? And it was like my first TV interview. And it was so nice to have someone who was just like applauding me and not needing to be in the center of attention, and can allow me to have my individual expression. Mm-hmm. But then also we can have our dreams together and different aspects together. And so that's really, so if you find someone who's jealous of you or, critical of you and your success, then that's not, they're kind of trying to pull you down. And I see a self-actualized relationship where you're both always lifting each other up, and it doesn't feel like you're being a doormat doing it. You're actually doing it from your own sense of fullness. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
That's a good definition, yeah. And we know self-actualization, certainly the way Maslow conceptualized it and the way we think about it through our Jungian work of individuation, it's more than just being successful in a career. Mm-hmm. It really means finding who you are beyond your persona, ego mind,
yes.
Kind of your past history and your, the way you see yourself as a persona, as a personality. Getting at that deeper self, what you call the true self in us, and living from that deeper sense of kind of completeness, right?
You're kind of like plugged into your own true self versus needing to plug into an external person.
Yeah.
Like a buoy, like a life raft or something, right?
Yeah, so right there, it would
it would create a very different dynamic in a relationship, because it is not just that kind of biological or social level where, you know, it's advantageous to have a mate, or it's about the family and it's about society, and of course it includes all that, because, you know, we have to live in the world, but it's also about that higher realm of spirituality, not in the religious sense, but that connectedness to each other and to the world.
And that's a really good point, that it does include all the levels. So I think a lot of people think, well, I abandon those needs and I become spiritual. I don't need the material world anymore. I don't need society anymore because I'm spiritual. And you kind of let go of the world. It's about incorporating all the sensuality and the sexuality and the physical rawness of having a relationship, and then also the social and being able to enjoy marriage and family and all those things, and then also have that higher level. So it's not just abandoning those as you go higher. It's more like bringing them up with you. But they change, because if you're on the lower levels, the need for a home and career and to take care of yourself physically is much different energy than if you're taking care of yourself physically from a higher level, which is like one of the things on the hierarchy of needs. One of the scales is aesthetic needs. So where you're not looking to, you know, build a house and have that foundation, it's like, well, what else? How do we want to live? What kind of house do we want to live in? And how do we want to feel and be abundant in those places, from a pure creativity and pure expression versus I got to meet the Joneses and I got to have the same picket fence house that, you know, my neighbor has, because it'll show that I'm kind of match up with everyone. It's like coming from a different place. Like, it doesn't mean you can't have all the material success and connection and friends. It's just a different experience of it.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly the world is in much need of these kind of relationships, not only in marriages and couples, but in businesses and in life in general.
Yeah. So when we talk about self-actualized, what does that mean to you as in a person? What would be a good step for someone to start to really assess where they're at and how to take the steps toward becoming more of who they really are?
Yeah, I think
in 5 minutes.
Yeah. The first step is to take stock and to see, you know, am I more than just this persona? And for those of you that are not familiar with the term, the persona simply means our personality, the way we present ourselves socially and the way others perceive us. And Jung believed that it's a type of mask that we wear in social settings. Now, he didn't mean it in a negative way, right? Mm-hmm. That we were hiding or something like that, but that we need that mask to interact and to identify ourselves as individuals. But his main point was that there's something more. There's something deeper beyond that persona. And if you notice, a lot of people identify very strongly with that persona. Mm-hmm. They believe that's who I am, right? Mm-hmm. This persona, if something happens to it, I'm lost. Mm-hmm. And that's the process of individuation, or the beginning of it, where you start to go in deeper and examine who is it that's underneath the persona. You know, what are the dreams? What are the basis of my meaning in life? What's my higher purpose in life beyond having a good job and having a home and having a car and all that good stuff?
And I think the persona, to know how engaged you or how it has control over you, is that if you have a hard time taking criticism, or that you worry about what people think about you all the time, like if that is you're totally identified with the perception of your own personality and your persona. And individuation, it becomes where you know deep inside, like there's more to you than just the surface. And then you don't get wavered by criticism or needing to fit in all the time. And you can be individual, and you're not part of the herd mentality, as Jung used to say. You start to say, you know what? because all my friends are getting married and having babies, I don't want to do that right now. Like maybe I want to have a partner, but maybe I don't want to have kids. It's okay. I don't care what other people think as much. And that's individuation. And so it's not just about doing that to as a defense, but doing it from a true sense of knowing who you are. And the only way you really know is if you have to turn inward. And some of the ways is really working with the unconscious and really understanding that there's a part of you that you don't know yet, that you can't see yet, but that's waiting for you to discover her or him. And that's really the individuation process.
The hidden self.
Yes. And we all have glimpses of that. It's that when we were kids and the feeling of invincibility and the feeling of magic and creativity and intuition, all those parts of us that the world has kind of numbed a little bit and knocked out because it says you can't do all those things. And it's about breaking free of that and becoming fully expressed. And so imagine that you find a relationship that's from the persona, you're going to just meet someone on that level where the potential is to meet someone on that higher level. And that's really what higher love is.
Great topic. We're going to have to do some more on this topic. And thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Yes. And don't forget to join us on Facebook in our group, Creative Love Gurus, for this podcast. Also, if you would love to leave us a review, that would be awesome on iTunes. We get higher rankings if you leave a review, so it would be great to get that feedback. And we hope to see you on the next episode.
See you soon. Much love.
Take care. You've been listening to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. For more information, visit us on our website at creativelove.com.